Welcome to the number one reselling podcast in the world. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 290.
Did I throw you off a little bit?
You did. That? I mean, it's facts, but it's just
spitting facts.
We've always been like, I'm not very big on being braggadocious. Like I never throw out numbers, 90-day totals.
Which is why that was a little bit like tongue in cheek.
I get and our listeners understand that. If you're new, please understand. Like that's not how we roll.
This is Pure Hustle Podcast. We're real, relevant reselling, and we're not as cocky as that sounded, but we are the number one reselling podcast in the world.
There's good pride and there's bad pride, right? I mean, I do take pride in the fact that we've been able to build an awesome listening audience over the last almost 5 years now. 5 years. 5 years, okay? That both our businesses have grown. You've gone through a lot of kind of transitioning here and back and forth. You went from everybody, I always think about the fifth wheel saga, and now you're past that, right? And now you're looking at possibly purchasing a home here in the near future.
Yeah. See, and hopefully a lot of our listeners are too. So our episode today, we're talking about selling clothing.
It's not even related to what we're talking about.
But one of the things that I hope all of us are doing, we talk a lot about in this podcast, like setting yourself up for opportunities. Like we don't believe in luck, but we believe that consistency allows opportunities to be presented to you. And if you've worked hard enough and set yourself up, then you can take advantage of those opportunities. You can have an opportunity. I can't tell you how many opportunities I've had come across in my life, and I didn't have the capital or the know-how or the energy to capitalize on it. The person who does, it's easy to look at someone like that and go, oh, they're just lucky. And it's like, no, opportunities come to everybody. It's just, can you capitalize on it? So right now, I think, personally, I'm working on stacking lots of cash as much as I can and being ready for a potential housing market crash, because that's when the biggest wealth transfers in the world is when there's downturn markets. And so as resellers, we're in a good position to continue to be making money even as inflation's going and all those things. And some of that could be through selling clothing, which we're going to be talking about today, but being just in a good position so that you can capitalize on whatever happens, whether it's inflation, whether it's deflation. No matter what happens, we're in a position to capitalize on the market. And that's why we love doing what we're doing. Is we're really, it sets people free, right? When you're financially stable, when you're financially independent, you're not reliant on other people's whims. You're not reliant on other things happening. You can take care of what needs to be taken care of and make the money you need to make one way or another. And so reselling gives us that opportunity. And today we're going to be talking about one of the number one ways people kind of get started with reselling. Not everybody. Some people have certain niches that they're into, but clothing is really a low barrier to entry, but it's not just for beginners. Clothing is one of those things where you can get into it pretty easy, but then there's also so much room to grow. You can really niche down and get really specific about certain types of vintage clothing, certain brands, and really, really specialize in something and make a lot of money. But there's pros and cons to selling clothing, and today we're going to be talking about that.
All right. So before we get started, though, I do want to say, I know we've already been lagging, but thank you to all of you that have joined our Patreon. If you haven't joined our Patreon, it is patreon.com/PureHustlePodcast. There's a link below. And part of that, we've tied the Discord that we began a month ago. Maybe it's been more than a month. About a month, and it is growing. And every day we have new people in the Discord, and our Discord is different than many. We're not a cook group. We're not a bolo group. But there are bolos in there, and there are deals in there, and there's hustles of the week, and there's a great discussion happening within that community.
There's community.
Yeah. And that's the thing. What I love is, Mike doesn't encounter this as much as I do, but reselling is a very solitary process, right? And, I do have kids, but I don't have my kids all the time because they're with their mom. So there's a few days where it's just me, and that's it. And some of you aren't even married, you don't have kids, maybe you're not in a relationship, and it's just you, and you're grinding and you kind of miss that element of being in community. And I will tell you, what I love about the Discord is there is no flexing of numbers. I mean, there is sometimes hey, look at what I found and so on, but that's okay, right? We celebrate with one another. And so I really encourage you guys, if you're listening to this podcast and you're looking for a community to thrive in, to be a part of, to be welcomed, join our Patreon so you're able to be part of that community. Again, patreon.com/PureHustlePodcast. I'd love to see you there. And one of the hustles of the week does come from our Discord. So it'll be great to share. All right, let's talk about clothing here. So the reason I brought this up is funny. I don't know if Mike's okay with this. When I mentioned Mike, what we're discussing today, because sometimes, we go back and forth on what our topics are going to be. And I said clothing, and Mike's like, right. And I get it. And I'm like that sometimes too. And I think most clothing sellers are like that, right? But the reason I want to talk about clothing is that I think there's many people that have just been like in one niche and they're kind of like thinking, okay, maybe I should branch onto something else. Or there's new sellers that are like, what's the best way for me to start reselling? Right. Or maybe you're a veteran, a reseller, and you want to hear new ways of doing things. And so I thought this would be a good episode.
Yeah. And maybe you are a clothing reseller. So if you're a clothing reseller and maybe we've missed one of the good points of clothing or one of the bad points, because I'm sure you've got your pet peeves. Yeah. Let us know in the comments below. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe, comment below. Let us know what your pros and cons are of selling clothing.
All right. Now that we're like almost 6 minutes in, let's get to the episode. All right. So 3 things I want to break this down in is the good, the bad, and the best.
Ooh, ending on a high note.
Yeah, I thought so. Well, I don't want to lose you guys like halfway into the episode. Like we give all the good and then it's over.
It's over. Yeah, we're saving the best for last.
Oh, we hustle the week in between too. So here's the thing, and this Mike just talked about this. It is the easiest item to access to resell. And we're talking about secondary goods, by the way. We're talking about used clothing. We're not talking about retail arbitrage. I mean, this can dip into that a little bit, but used clothing, there is so much out there, and there's so many places to go. Now, if you were to start all over with clothing, Mike, where would you get started? Would you go to the bins? Would you go to thrift stores? Would you do garage sales?
Yeah, I think I still would go to thrift stores because the nice thing is the prices are so low. And so there's room, especially if you're new, it's a good place to learn. You're not,
even with the higher prices, they're so low.
Yeah. And so even if you make a mistake, you buy a brand, you get home and you realize, oh, this is a good shirt. Oh no, it's got a stain or it's missing a button or the things you haven't learned to quite look for yet. Mm-hmm. Or you realize, hey, this brand sells, but typically only if it's this material and not this other material. So the educational costs of learning this niche are relatively low, right? When you're messing up with vintage toys or vintage electronics, maybe you're doing fine if you're picking those things up at garage sales. But when you're doing like local deals or you're trying to get from collectors and then flip from collectors, the potential of making a mistake is much higher. And so I think I would still go to thrift stores because the prices are so low. They're everywhere. And the nice thing is you can go any time of the week, right? You get off of work, you can go. Garage sales can be great for clothing too. And
but it's hit or miss though.
It's hit or miss. I mean, everything is going to be hit or miss. But the cool thing too is if you're into vintage electronics, your opportunities of going to actual outlet stores or going to retail box stores are almost none. Whereas if you're selling clothing, that's an opportunity for you too. Like you potentially can go get things on clearance, get things that have been discontinued, and people are looking for a certain style, a certain brand. And if you know your niche, you can actually do sourcing at a Target or at a mall. You know, it's not always going to be the easiest, but it's one of those things where you can really source it almost anywhere, no matter where you are, where you live. There's going to be a way to pick up some clothing.
Now, some things I do want to add about the abundance of it is you had mentioned thrift stores, and thrift stores get, they've gotten a lot of pressure lately because they're high prices. But here's the thing. The reason I think Mike says thrift stores, and I can't speak for Mike, but it's everything's already selected, right? So it's different. Like the bins are great, right? The bins, it's your lowest cost as far as getting anything. Or if you go to a rag house and you get a bale of clothing or whatever it is. But when it comes to a thrift store, it's already been quote unquote pre-selected. Now that's good and bad, right? The bad is the thrift stores, like the store that shall not be named, Goodwill, or some of the other chains, they've already selected the top stuff and that ends up on their online sites. But there's a lot of thrift stores that still put it out there, right? Because there's still a good volume of sales. And so they'll put out clothing out there and it's already selected. Most of the time, I would say there aren't many issues, right? And there's certain thrift stores that you avoid because everything you pick up might have a hole or a stain. But I would say most of the chain thrift stores, you don't come across that. Right. And so that's what makes it a little bit easier. And for example, garage sales, when you find clothing, I would say for the most part, it's pristine, the stuff I pick up. Like it's rare that people will just it's put out their trash clothing. And at least for me. One
thing I was at a thrift store with my friend. I was trying to teach him how to resell, and we were picking up some VCRs and some other things. And a lady stopped us in the line to go to the cashier, and she goes, "You guys are reselling this stuff, huh?" We're like, "Yeah." And she goes, you shouldn't pick up stuff at thrift stores. You should go to garage sales. As if I don't know, but I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a good point. Definitely do garage sales. But she had a good argument. She said, because people give away what they think is their trash to thrift stores, but things they think are valuable, they sell at garage sales. And of course, that isn't always the case, but a lot of things that don't sell at the garage sale end up going to the thrift store. And it's not always the case. Sometimes it's very wealthy people who don't have the time to do a garage sale. They don't care. And they're just going to drop their stuff off in a Goodwill bin. That happens all the time. But it's more likely it's like, this stuff I'll take to the Goodwill. Ooh, this is like really nice stuff I have here. I should sell this. If you got nice stuff, it's more like you're going to sell it. And you're still going to find junk at garage sales. It does happen. But chances are at least that person thinks it's probably valuable. So your chances of finding better stuff is a little bit higher at garage sales.
Yeah, agreed. And here's the ultimate thing is that, like Mike said earlier, like you can afford to make mistakes, right? So if you buy something with a hole or a stain, it's a lesson learned. Or you find out, like, for example, certain vintage clothing, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, I sell stuff that's vintage all the time that has a hole here, a stain here, something's wrong with it. I mean, it's crazy. Like, I've sold white vintage shirts with yellowing, and a lot of people get on my case because they're like, you should OxyClean it and do all this, but I just don't have the time to do that. And it'll still sell, right? So you have the opportunity, like you said. I think this is one of the things that wasn't on our list here on our program, was that clothing allows you to make mistakes and it doesn't cost you as much. Now, there's the low cost, and we already mentioned that, right? So I think there's like a tier system. I would say the bottom like prices that you get are probably the bins or garage sales. Right. And there's also rag houses, but it all depends. Some rag houses now are charging more if you're buying vintage clothing, but there's others that just sell bales of clothes. And so you can get those for pretty cheap there. For example, for us, our bins, and maybe the people that go to the bins all the time disagree with us in San Diego, but to me, it's not worth it. It's just a lot of time. It's a lot of competition. They do not sell by the pound, which is kind of wild to me because most parts of the country do. And so for us, for myself, I like doing collections. So for example, I've picked up a Rain Spooner collection of Hawaiian shirts like 3 months ago. I picked up a Harley collection a couple weeks ago, and actually this last week of a bunch of Harley items from a local deal. And again, like you said, right, whenever we make those local deals, usually the stuff is pretty good.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. There's kind of like this, I'm not going to post this on OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace if it's junk.
Yeah.
And
again, there will be people who do that.
Yeah.
But typically the stuff you're finding on OfferUp and Letgo doesn't exist anymore, but Facebook Marketplace, all those things, are going to be the things that people find valuable. And that doesn't mean that they're trying to get retail prices. Some people do. But yeah, if somebody has a collection of a certain Harley shirts or whatever it is, they might be selling it at 20% of the retail value just because they want to get rid of it, but they know they don't want to take it to the thrift store because, hey, I should be able to get a few $100 off of all these nice shirts that I have or these boots or whatever it is. So, and sometimes it's all they need. They're not expecting to they could flip it on eBay if they wanted to take the time, but they don't want to. So they're happy to take the 20% of what they could get from it instead of the 100%. So it's definitely worthwhile doing that. And then another thing that's really good about clothing is really easy to ship. I would say that's one of my favorite things. I love selling hard goods because for me, hard goods a lot of times are easier to list than clothing. But every time a hard good sells, especially bigger items, the shipping can be a little bit hectic. Do I have the right size box? I have a lot of boxes that fit, but sometimes it's like, oh, there's still a lot of room in here, so I got to do extra bubble wrap. Or, oh, this is just a little bit too big. Now I got to get a box that's bigger, but now the box is a lot bigger, and you're just running into all of these things. Or with clothing, almost all clothing is going to fit into some kind of a poly mailer or a padded flat rate envelope or some kind of cheap envelope. Maybe you box it if it's shoes, but a lot of things it's just going in cheap to send. If it's shirts, some sweatshirts, you're going to be under £1, so your shipping is going to be really cheap. And even heavier things like jackets can be folded up and squished pretty small and put in, and you don't have to worry about, is it going to break during shipment? Yeah. So shipping a clothing item is a lot better. So I guess one way of thinking about it is you're going to either spend the time on the listing, which I feel like listing clothing takes a little bit longer.
We'll talk about that in a moment.
You're going to either spend the time on the listing or the shipping. So the nice thing is you're not spending as much time with shipping when it comes to clothing.
Now, I will add a little bit to that is that when it comes to shipping, though, you're able to standardize your shipping, right? So, for example, I know that all my clothing will go in certain size poly mailer and it's going to be first class. So I don't even have to think about it, right? I don't have to find a box. I don't have to get the bubble wrap. That's where it's going. I know that when it comes to jackets and so on, they're going to go in a medium flat rate box. I already have the boxes. I already know how it's going to happen. It's easy. So once you're, for shoes, we haven't even talked about shoes. I have a shoe box. So I have the USPS shoe boxes. If they're in a region where it's cheaper for me to ship with that, I'll ship with that, or I'll go medium flat rate. And so generally, there's not a lot of thinking left in shipping. I know a lot of people, when they got on eBay, you know, they struggle with the whole idea of how do I ship things out. And I would say clothing is probably the easiest things to ship out, especially if you're just picking up a lot. If you're just doing a lot of shirts, like that's easy, right? And it's when you get to the complicated things. Like the other day, I sold a bunch of like I sold like a barista machine, and I sold another blender, a couple blenders. My goodness, man, I spent like 30 to 45 minutes on a couple of those, and it was still worth it. The profit was there, but what I would have given to make the same profit on just selling a jacket, right, would have taken like 2 minutes to pack. So, all right, hey, before we get moving, speaking of packing, I want to talk about AmericanBubbleBoy.com.
Yeah.
Were you able to snag that deal?
No, I saw it too late.
Oh my goodness, man. So if you don't know what we're talking about, on Earth Day, they had this Earth Day 2022 code. And I thought we were quick on it. And it's sold out. And then Joel, the head of American Bubble Boy, released it again. They're awesome people at 1 p.m. And literally, I think by like 1:15, they were sold out again. And so I felt really bad because we dropped it on the Discord and we still didn't get to it.
It's the reason why it sold out so fast is when you go through American Bubble Boy, you're already getting really good quality bubble wrap at a very good price, and it's coming straight to your door. So if they're discounting that even more, that's crazy.
It was $20 that day for
amazing.
750 square feet.
But even if you did miss that, if you are a listener of Pure Hustle Podcast and you want a discount, you can use our promo code or our link. And if you're a first-time buyer, you're going to get a discount on your purchase. The promo code, is it PHP?
No, it is Pure Hustle Podcast.
Pure Hustle Podcast. Yeah, so try that Pure Hustle Podcast. If it doesn't work, let us know, or use the link that we have in the description, and that way you do get a discount. Okay, it's not an Earth Day discount.
If you don't get the discount, it's still worth it.
It is.
You know, $39.99, 1 day, 2 day, local pickup, all free shipping. I myself order from all the time. So
yeah, I buy it without the discount every time I buy it. So that just goes to show it's worth it.
But you get your Bubble Boy bucks, right? You seen that?
Yeah.
You're like, all right, no, there is. Check it out. All right, hey, so let's talk about the bad. I want to hear what you think is the bad. Don't even look at the sheet. Just what is the bad?
For me, the worst part about clothing, well, there's a few things, but if I had to do like the thing that I dislike the most is listing it, taking pictures and listing, because there's so much that can go into or has to go into the sizing. Most of my shirts and things I do, this is probably, don't take my advice. This is not the way to do it. You should take measurements. You should measure it. You should add the measurements in there. You should take pictures of however you want to do that. I typically, unless it's an expensive item, if it's like a $15 shirt, $20 shirt, I'm just going to put it's a medium, it's a large, and I go with it. Because otherwise, if I'm spending a lot of time, the sleeve length is this, from the armpit to the here, the neckline is this, from the armpit to the waist is this. Oh, to me, it's like, shoot me, because it takes so much time to do. And if you get into a zone, like if you have the station right now, I'm trying to resell out of a shed. So I don't have a lot of space to set up to take the picture and then to lay it out on a table to do the measurements. If I had a little bit more room, because when we were living in the condo that we were at, it was easier to kind of just set up the living room, as today is picture and listing day for clothing. And so we'd take pictures of like 100 items, and then we would just do all of the measurements right then, write it on a pad, get it into the computer, easy peasy. But now that I'm doing it out of a shed, it's just like, it takes so much, and you have to put in all those details, right? When I'm taking, especially if it's a hard good that has a UPC on it, I can literally scan the UPC, all the information pops up, put it in, just change the condition, good to go. Mm-hmm. So the time it takes is quite a bit more with clothing. So that would probably be my number one, what I dislike about clothing. That's why I have a tote full of Hawaiian shirts right now that I got at a garage sale, I probably have like 40 of them and I haven't listed one of them yet.
I'll buy
And
those
it's been a
off
while.
for you for like triple the price you paid.
That might be worth it.
Because I know what you paid. So,
Well, maybe not triple then. Because I think I only paid like a couple bucks a piece.
that's what I mean. I shouldn't haggle.
$6 a
on
shirt.
The podcast.
Come on, man.
Okay, well, I don't know. I would buy because I would. Here's the thing. I'm the other way. I love listing clothing because you can get in a groove. And I know this is the bad, but as long as you put all your, like you set them all up. So like say Hawaiian shirts, I would only work on Hawaiian shirts. Right. And then I would do all the t-shirts and then I do all the pants. Now, when you get in a groove, it's possible. But yeah, it's a lot of work. Right. You got to have the measurements. Right. Because you don't want to deal with, item that is described. And it becomes a mess. Right. And that's part of the reason why returns happen a lot in clothing. Right. Because even if you put the measurements, people are like, oh, this didn't fit right. The greatest question I always get is with shoes. So do these fit large? Like, I don't know. Do you like your shoe loose? Do you like it tight on your feet? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is even with measurements, I mean, I know what size waist I am for pants, and I know what brands I like that I fit those sizes. So if I'm buying pants on, Poshmark or eBay, I'm not really looking at the measurements because I know. And even then, depending on the year it was made and all of those, sometimes like, oh, this one fits tighter. I have literally the exact same model pant. Everything's the same except for this one feels like a half inch tighter than the other one. So I could see why the measurements could be helpful. But if I'm buying a t-shirt, I'm probably not looking at every single measurement. I'm like, oh, it's a medium. I'm a medium. I'm buying that. Mm-hmm. But that's why you get so many returns. And there are a lot of returns with clothing because people will buy them. Oh, it doesn't quite fit the way I was hoping it would fit. It's like, well, I'm not your try it on person. You know what I mean?
Or people rent them sometimes, right? They need it for like an event.
Yes. Have you seen those things that they do now? I mean, I'm sure they've been doing them for a while, but they have those tags that they put on. So there's tags you can get that go like between, and there's different ways you can put it, but it basically goes around like the collar to like the sleeve or the collar all the way down on like dresses. And the return policy is as long as this tag, and it's like a big loop. Almost like one of the ones
Express did something like that back in the day.
And as long as you don't remove this tag, you can return it. So you can try it on and see if it fits. And if it doesn't fit, return it, no problem. But if you're wearing it to an event, you're not going to want this big like looped tag on your thing. So that's a way of preventing people.
Maybe we'll start doing that.
Yeah, it's a way of preventing, especially for things like you've sold jackets before, right? For a football team, and it's like, oh, it's a Super Bowl and people are buying this jacket.
It's the worst when that happens.
Buy the jacket for that event and then they return it. But yeah, if you had one of those things, it's like, well, they're going to have to cut that. And then they can't say, hey, it doesn't fit, but I also cut the tag. Like, well, why'd you cut the tag if it didn't fit?
Yeah.
Oh, because you wore it out. Well,
no, it's true. It's true. So now I will say later on I think returns with clothing are easy, and I'll talk about that later on. But yes, there is, and there's a possibility of missing flaws. I can't tell you how many times I've sent out something and people are like, there's a hole over here or there's a stain down here. I'm like, I kind of missed that. Right. And so it's very easy to do. Now, the listing we already talked about, there's a lot of work, but I would say the biggest one out of all of these is there's so much competition. So much competition. Now, there's ways to work around that competition. And some of those I'll share later on, but it's, if you develop a following, it doesn't matter how much competition there is, right? Because for example, right now I have a few buyers that they follow my store and they are always buying Hawaiian shirts from me. And we kind of have a relationship where like they'll buy it on Thursday and then they won't pay until Monday or Tuesday because usually they're traveling. And so, the guy always goes, hey, mahalo. And I'm like, all right, man, no worries. You know how it is. And so he pays me and we're good. Right. So, but there is huge competition, right? So for example, Harley Davidson shirts. Like I love Harley. Like I love selling Harley all day, but it does not sell like it used to. So I would say when we started the podcast, I could sell pretty much almost any Harley shirt that had some kind of intriguing design. It didn't have to be vintage. For probably like $40-$50. And now it's gone down to like $20-$30.
Yeah. Right? I think what kind of goes along with that is going back to the good, that there's an abundance. Now, if it's really, really scarce, if it's an item that's harder to get, if it's a niche that has almost no competition on eBay, chances are you're going to have a very difficult time sourcing that item. because if it was easy to source, there'd be more people selling it. So it's the trade-off you're paying there. If you want a niche that's easier to source, you're going to deal with more people in that competition. But the nice thing is, if it's still profitable, even with that much competition, that means that the competition really it's not that bad. Because one of the things people think is, because you gave a good example, if you're in a specific niche and you see that competition in Harley or Hawaiian shirts go up, that can hurt you or affect you. But clothing in general, if you were just to say, well, X percentage of resellers are clothing resellers, and you're like, well, that sounds like too much, I'm not going to get into clothing. Well, if half of those are in a niche, they're into women's dresses or women's shoes, and you're not in that niche, it doesn't matter how many are selling that. So even though there are a lot of people who sell clothing, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be selling the clothing you have. And if you're finding good brands, those brands still sell. So, it's a supply and demand thing. And so if you get some good Patagonia jackets or whatever you're picking up, yeah, there might be a lot of people selling that. But the nice thing is, with vintage clothing, people are going to be looking for not just how many Patagonia jackets there are, but I want a green one, and I want one that has this design on it. So there might only be 4 of those listed on eBay. So that's not really that much competition on that style, that brand, that. So once you start niching down into the categories and subcategories, the competition isn't actually as fierce as it seems.
Hey, we're supposed to be talking about the bad here, man.
But there are a lot of people reselling.
I know. Now, it's funny you bring up Patagonia. So I think this is the biggest move right now that is going to cause some waves and some maybe panic amongst the reselling community. And, I usually don't push, other YouTubers. I mean, we're friends with all of them, but, Auction Professor just came out with a video discussing how eBay is now selling imperfects. And what that means is that they've made deals with a bunch of brands. So Patagonia, the North Face, Nike, whatever. I don't know what all the brands are. Okay. But all these brands now are going to be selling imperfect things that are flawed. So think about when you go to TJ Maxx, or you go to Marshalls, or you go to Ross or Burlington, all those items that you find in there, or maybe sometimes you go to an outlet, right? And sometimes they're
like seconds.
They're like seconds, right?
Yeah.
And so now they are making direct deals with eBay, and they're going to be selling via eBay. That's gonna cause an issue, but I don't think it's gonna affect the vintage market. I think it will affect the retail arbitrage market. Yeah. But with vintage items, the reason the value's there is not because it's because of the brand, but it's also because it's vintage, because it's unique. It's hard to come by. It's hard to find. The scarcity is what brings the value.
Yeah, and then when it comes to pricing too on that, so let's use Patagonia as an example. If you're wanting a new Patagonia and you go to the store and let's say it's $200 for the jacket, and then you see the imperfect on eBay and it's $150, that's a pretty good savings. Mm-hmm. But if you're willing to say, you know what, but I really only want to spend $50 on a jacket, you can go used. And even if it's not like a unique vintage version of a jacket, because there's a market for that, those are still probably going for even more than a lot of retail prices. But you can get a 6-7 year old Patagonia jacket in pretty good shape, but hey, it's got this one little stain at the corner, you can barely see it. Hey, I can pay $50 for that one. So yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt the secondhand market.
Unless you're Elaine from Seinfeld. Do you remember that episode with the sweater and the red dot?
Oh yeah, that was the cashmere.
With George bought it, and it was great. Yeah. It's still the red dot.
And then he gives it to the janitor lady at the office.
And she's like, what is this?
It's cashmere.
If you know what we're talking about, let us know. Let us know your favorite Seinfeld episode. I'd love to know in the comments.
There's some good ones.
So, but here's the thing. That with that story though, they are gonna sell stuff for 60% off. That's what's being rumored.
That's pretty significant.
That is pretty significant. So again, will it deal a heavy blow to the secondary market? I don't believe so. As long as, like you said, people are looking for specific things when it comes to used clothing, right? Now, there is Vero, right? This is where, you're selling a certain clothing brand and that brand doesn't want you selling it. So the more of the luxury brands do this, Hermes, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, and so on. And so that's increasing even more because a lot of these brands are now wanting to be the ones that sell the used goods. Right. And so because we had mentioned this, I think, I don't know, a few episodes ago, how like Oscar de la Renta, which not a lot of people sell that I know, but they themselves are like the only people that want to sell their used items. They don't want anybody else selling them. Right. Mm-hmm. So you could get Vero'd if you're selling some of their products on eBay.
It seems crazy as a company, though. Like, can you imagine somebody saying like, hey, you bought this thing, but guess what? If you want to, you can never sell this to a friend. You cannot sell it at a garage sale. You can't put it on Facebook Marketplace. You can't sell it on eBay. It's like, wait a minute, it's my thing. If I'm done with it, what are you telling me my options
You
are?
mean the first sale doctrine?
Give it back to you or keep it. Like that, you can't tell me what I do with my things. And so, yeah, that seems pretty crazy. And now I do understand like the things that have a lot of counterfeit that they're trying to, prevent, and they're trying to make sure that there's brand integrity. Mm-hmm. So I understand that process, but it seems like it's really difficult to enforce. I mean, I know they do Veros on eBay, but
so Veros are your listing will get pulled down if a brand doesn't want you selling their brand. So no, we're going to finish that. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, I think I was finished.
I just cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's good, man.
So that's part of the bad of reselling. But I will tell you, don't let that scare you. That's few and far between. I've had maybe, I want to say 2 Vero in my entire 10 years of selling on eBay. One was for a mesh trucker snapback cat from Imperial Beach Cafe.
Hey, why not?
What? How did that get Veroed? But for example, one of the easy ones, and it's not necessarily about the brand, but if you Velcro, if you sell shoes that have Velcro and you put Velcro in your listing, it will get Veroed, and you will not. You have to use the word hook and loop.
Yeah, hook and loop.
Hook and loop. So anyways, but hey, the bad. I mean, to me, it's all about adapting and moving around that to be able to sell that clothing.
That's good.
All right, are we ready to talk about our hustle of the week here soon?
Yeah, before we do that, though, we want to talk about one of our other sponsors, and that is Skull Shaver. And I got a funny story. So Skull Shaver is super awesome product. If you've been listening for a while, probably don't need to go into the spiel about how close it is and how long the battery lasts. And I'm not going to mention how great of a product it is in all of those ways. The English term for that, the literary device, is called paralipsis.
Oh, is it?
When you're like, I'm not going to mention that you don't know what you're doing, and then you go on to like, so you really mention it by saying you're not going to mention it. Is that like the modern
version? Is that like the modern equivalent of I'm just saying?
No, not exactly. But it's where you point something out by saying you're not going to point it out. Like I'm not going to. Yeah. So anyways, it's a great product. But so I have students, I got 6th graders, and one of my 6th graders, I have another teacher that sometimes helps out in the class, and she asks the other teacher, my student goes, does Mr. Mike, I use my last name, but does Mr. Mike's, is his son bald? And the other teacher goes, well, no, I don't think so. I think it has hair now. Why? Well, because he's bald. And she thought it was like, if it's like a genetic thing, like if I'm bald, my kids are going to be bald.
Yeah.
And so she's like, no, like he cuts his hair every day. And she's like, really? And I'm like, I almost was like, yeah, I need to do like a Skull Shaver announcement in class. Like I use Skull Shaver on my head every day. But then I forgot to use Skull Shaver one day. And so my hair started to grow out. I mean, not a lot, but just enough you could see little pieces of hair. Mm-hmm. And so she calls the other teacher over the next day. You're right. I can see little hairs.
Oh my goodness.
So that's how it works. Like this student didn't think I had any hair on my head because I use Skull Shaver every day. It's a great product. You should pick it up.
So use our promo code HUSTLE with a capital H, HUSTLE, and get that discount.
Hustle.
All right. Hey, if you haven't followed us on social media, we are Pure Hustle Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We are Pure Hustle Cast on Twitter. You could always give us a call, 619-738-1170. We always love playing Hustle of the Week that people call in. It's always great. So 619-738-1170. You could also shoot us an email, pureaspodcast@gmail.com. That's pureaspodcast@gmail.com. And if you're listening to the podcast and you've never watched us on YouTube, jump on over. We're trying to get to 10K here. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, that bell notification, and like this episode. And as always, we're grateful for all the iTunes reviews. Definitely help us out. If you haven't dropped a review yet, we are greatly appreciative of that. I would pull up on my phone. My phone is out of storage.
Oh,
I had to like remove apps now. Like I'm playing
too many games on there.
I'm gonna put a terabyte. Like I'm gonna get a terabyte phone.
Yeah. Well,
I'm done with this game.
The nice thing with Samsung, not the new ones. I actually just got a new one. I was bummed they took this feature away. But you used to be able to, no problem, put whatever size extra cards in there. You just put a micro SD card.
I remember those days.
Yeah. Apple never did that though.
No, never. And again, if you haven't yet, join us on the Discord. Go to patreon.com/PureHustlePodcast and become part of a thriving reselling community.
Yeah.
All right, it's time for that hustle.
Come on, hustlers. It's the freaking hustle of the week. Yeah. All right. Our first hustle comes from Ryan. The IG handle is at resells.
Rack resellers.
Rack resellers. All right. Went sourcing at the store that shall not be named. Dun, dun, dun. And picked up 2 pairs of dress shoes at $15 a pair. Listed on eBay and sold one Edward Green brown dress shoe for $339 plus shipping. Good grief. And another pair of Edward Green shoes for $250 plus shipping. So one of the reasons I love doing the hustles of the week is they're like, one, it's celebrating. We're celebrating a great find that somebody did. We're reinforcing the idea that if you're out there enough, if you're out sourcing, you're working really hard, you're gonna find these things. They're gonna come up. But it's also like a little bolo. Edward Green shoes. If you didn't know,
I never knew.
Be on the lookout. That is a item that you should be. So right now, after you listen to the podcast, go on to eBay, look up Edward Green shoes.
That way, kill the market right now.
That way, you know what you're looking for, and pick them up next time you see one.
No, but seriously, in my entire time of 10 years of reselling on eBay, I've never come across a pair of Edward Green ever. Like you said, right? The more niche certain items that are harder to find, the more valuable. So Good work there, Ryan. All right. This hustle week comes from Jason, IG handle GeoWolf_resells. They were not going to go to the thrift store since they had too much inventory to list. We've all had that problem. But let the mama and pop thrift store that they were willing to pick up any sealed VHS. So that's great. Had some networking relationship and said, hey, if you get any sealed VHS, which is hot right now, it all depends on what you pick up, but it's hot right now. That if anything comes in, let them know. So did not want to go back on his word. And so Jason decided to stop into the thrift store, picked up the sealed VHS. And on the way out, he saw a pair of shoes that looked to be like Walmart brand, which I could see that happening. Like, there's like that fake Yeezys that you find at Walmart or whatever.
Yeah. And
so looked them up. And the only reason they kept looking them up was because it said made in Italy. So looked at the comps and noticed that these shoes were selling for $200+. So grabbed this pair of shoes for $10, listed on eBay and sold for $375 plus ship. Now you're all wondering what were those shoes, and so was I because I didn't put it in the notes. Well, this is what they were. So Jason picked up a pair of Golden Goose Superstar sneakers with glittery heel tabs.
Yeah, Golden Goose, man.
I've never ever, again, 2 brands I have never seen in my entire life.
Hey,
so
the more you know.
Nice work there, Jason. $375.
That's crazy.
Like the only shoes I've sold for that much are like vintage shoes.
Yeah.
Like these are brands I've never heard of. So
yeah,
we got Edward Green and Golden Goose now.
Pick them up.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Our next one comes from Billy, and Billy's in our Discord. He's posting all the time too. Like pretty much every day we got good posts coming from him. And he's been doing a lot of storage lockers, doing lots of other things. Like it's not the only way he resells, but we've gotten a lot of good tips about how to do storage auctions from him. So love having him in the Discord. But anyways, one of the things that he picked up, I think this one was at a storage locker. He picked up about 300 buckles.
Well, this was at storage locker. He picked up 300 buckles.
Is it a garage sale?
At a garage sale for $50. This isn't even the hustle a week.
Yeah. So
imagine 300 buckles for about $50.
And I think, didn't he say he started buckles because of the podcast?
Yeah. I talk about buckles all the time.
Nice. So anyways, he picked up a bunch of buckles at a garage sale for, we paid $500 for 300 of them, which
$50. That's my typo.
Oh, okay.
It's $50.
Jeez. So that's crazy. But anyways, the one that came out of a storage unit. So he picked up a storage unit and he listed it on eBay, and it was a vintage Navajo Indian sterling silver turquoise belt buckle.
Now, before you talk about the price, he paid pennies for it.
Yeah. Once you list, like considering all the things that were in the.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And I think this is the storage locker that had all the other crazy things he sold. So amazing. But anyways, $553 plus shipping. I mean, I probably paid for the storage unit. That's amazing.
That's one item. So and the thing is, those are cool. Those there's a few things going on with that buckle, and I'll just talk about buckles here real quick. First of all, it's Navajo, so it's Indian, and there's a lot of collectors looking for those items. Sterling silver. Anything that is a buckle that is sterling silver, I will list high. Even if I can't find comps, I will list high because it's sterling silver. The fact that there was turquoise in that brings more value. So he had everything right with that buckle, paid pennies and sold it for over $500. That's awesome, Billy.
It's a killer. It's amazing.
All right. Thank you so much, Ryan, Jason, and Billy. Now, Mike, what's your hustle?
So is that I haven't completed all these sales yet. So this is like I'm looking into the future of
It's
what
all
I'm going to
good.
make off it. But recently I was at doing some garage sales, and there were totes full of, well, it was like a mixture of things. And on top of the totes, I saw like a big pirate ship, which is what drew my attention to it. So I walk over there, and there's a sticker on the front of one of them that says $10 for all, and it's like 4 totes, and they're not like huge totes, but good size, and then like a pirate ship on top of it. And I pick up the pirate ship and I look, and it's Playmobil. And I'm like, all right, this is a good sign. Playmobil is good. Now it's obviously best if it's unopened. Whenever I sell unopened, especially vintage Playmobil, it's killer profit. But even some of the open stuff, and what I'm going to do, so I go through all these totes, and there's a mixture of Lego, Playmobil, and like pirate miscellaneous stuff. So I'm like, half this stuff I can just throw away. I'm going to take all the Legos, throw it in my Lego bin. And that's one thing to do, is just kind of, if you're getting them randomly at garage sales, like a handful here, a handful there, throw them into a bin until you have enough to sell. But I started noticing that there was probably 6 different sets in this Playmobil, different ones. And I'm not going to spend the time to like part it out and make the sets complete. But what I'm going to do is, I said I'm not going to part it out. I am going to part it out. I'm not going to try and complete the sets, but I'm going to part it out by the things like the figures. If you just look at the figures, sell the figures in lots. And I've got so many. I've got knights, I've got cowboys, I've got pirates, I've got all kinds of different figures
It's so
in
funny.
this kit.
I want to buy it yourself. So Hawaiian shirts now Playmobil.
It's good stuff.
We'll break a deal at the end of the podcast.
Hey man, if I'm ever done reselling, you're gonna have a heyday in my my storage unit. I got some good stuff. But anyways, $10 for all of it.
Wow.
You can't beat that. Now it is going to be a little work, because it's not just like take a picture of an unopened box and send it. But the nice thing is this is going to be multiple listings, and so that feeds the beast. It keeps things running. I could take a picture of these 10 random ones together, and then you can lot them that way too. Just put them in. And the nice thing is they have years on the bottom, so you can kind of match them up somewhat by set. So it's like all of the ones that are like the Native American ones, and the ones that are cowboys, and then the ones that are the pirates, and then the ones that are the knights, and just kind of do them in separate sets. And if you look up the comps for those, they sell really well for just lots of the figures.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Nice. Now, I will continue the buckle discussion. So I shared this in the Discord, but I want to share it here. So I sold a Navajo belt buckle, but it's not Navajo what you're thinking. So there was a truck line that no longer exists anymore. So I've talked about before about like trucking kind of, like apparel or like Peterbilt and Freightline and so on. So Navajo used to be a company that existed. I think they shut down maybe in the 80s. I don't remember when, but they were known for having their logo was a Native American with blue turquoise eyes. Right. And so I found this buckle, and it was part of a huge lot. I paid like $400 for the lot. And I think it was like about like 130 or 150 buckles. I don't remember how many I bought, but this buckle just stood out. Like I was just like, this is really cool. I almost struggled selling it, because I was like, my MA is in Native American history. It was just a cool piece. And I ended up listing it high, because I saw that other things were selling. So like patches were selling, hats were selling. And so I listed it for about $150. So I paid about $4 for the buckle, and it sold within 6 hours for $125. And I was like, wow, that was fast. And here's what's awesome about it too, is that the person on their feedback was like, this is incredible. I've been waiting for a while for this item. So grateful that you're willing to sell it to me for the price that you sold it. And, I think they were just an former employee of the trucking company. So, yeah, keep an eye for those. That's a Bolo and a hustle of the week. So,
yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the best parts of reselling clothes.
Yeah.
Do you think returns are easy? Do you think I put returns are easy. Do you think this is true?
Yeah. I mean, one of the nice things with returns on clothing is, especially if you're paying the shipping back, and even if you're not, because I don't do free returns. I have my customers pay for returns, but either way, it's going to be a cheap shipment back, which is nice. When I sell something and it's a hard good and I paid $25 to ship it, but I got a deal because I, went through pirate
let's
ship.
Say you paid $100.
Oh yeah. I mean, who knows how much you've spent. Then they get it and they say, oh, this doesn't work or this or whatever their complaint is and they want to return it. Well, by the time you pay them, refund their shipping, refund with their fee, and then pay for them to ship it back, or if they have to pay, and then you're gonna have a really upset customer. I don't want to spend $25 to send this thing back. But when it's clothing, all right, well, I guess I'll pay the $3 to have this shipped back to me. Yeah. It's not the end of the world. And so that definitely makes returns easier. And the chances are you're not going to have them complain, hey, this was broken when I got it, or item not as described. The returns are typically going to be, hey, this didn't fit. Mm-hmm. Now, unless you missed a flaw when you were buying it, taking the pictures and packing it, which it can happen, yep. But chances are those are going to be fewer and far between, as opposed to it doesn't really fit right, or the coloring isn't exactly what I was hoping for, or whatever their excuse is. And so it's cheaper to have the return, and you're not going to have as upset of customers.
Yeah, agreed. And I always say this, like, a lot of people are opposed to, returns or free returns. Just always remember, if your item is not as described, eBay will force a return. And I don't mind being, having to take back an item, because usually the clothing, if it doesn't fit, it's going to sell again. And usually it sells more for me. Right? Or I'll tack on an extra $5 when I list it again, because there's already a comp that is sold at a certain price. And so
even though you're the comp,
even though I'm the comp, I create the comps. Like, yeah, and I've done that.
I make this market.
I do. Hey, remember that Playmobil during Christmas? Like, it was selling for $300, and I sold it for almost $1,000 because I made the market. Crazy. That was crazy. But with clothing, yeah, the shipping is not going to kill you. I mean, I'm trying to think of the last time I had an item that I shipped out that was like $100. Oh, I'll never forget. Remember that those heaters, like those portable heaters, it cost me like $120 to ship. And yeah, it didn't work. And you might say, well, eBay, you could choose not to accept returns. Well, if the item's not working, eBay's gonna make me do the return. And so I just ended up refunding them everything. Like, well, with the clothing item, hey, the jacket might be worth $200 to $300, but it only costs at the most $20 a ship. That's fine. I'll get it back and I'll resell it and I'll be good to go.
Yep. Now, one of the things I like about clothing is the ROI.
Oh, yeah.
ROI is great on clothing, and the ROI can be great on a lot of things. But the beautiful thing about things like shoes, shirts, jackets, whether you're at a garage sale or at a thrift store, you're usually picking these things up for a few bucks, maybe up to $10. Now, if you're buying, very expensive boots at a garage sale, you might be up, paying up on it. But I can't tell you how many times I've bought shoes for $2, $3, and I've sold them for close to $100 or over $100.
I just sold Red Wing boots I paid $2 for $87.
Yeah, no, it's amazing the ROI that you can get. Now, if you're buying vintage electronics, even at a garage sale or a thrift store, you might be getting a really nice vintage receiver or speakers, but you're probably paying $30-$40 for them and then selling them for $100, $150. So it's still good profit, but compared to a couple dollars to $100, even $1 to $40 flip, the ROI is so high. Like, the amount you'd have to sell something that you paid for $40 for to equal that same comp is outlandish.
Well, and let's take it down a notch. Let's say you're only paying like $1 per item and you're selling it for 20. That's still 20x, right? I mean, yeah, you have to sell more, right? It's nice to get that $1 thing that you sell for 100. It doesn't happen as much as it used to, but I sell stuff all the time that I pay $5-$6 and it sells for close to 100. But even if you don't, even if you're just consistently finding those items that sell for $20 to $30 and you're only paying $1 or $2 or $3, like, you keep selling, like, the ROI, it keeps returning, right? And so you're able to keep having cash flow, right? And the other thing that I didn't mention here is the fact that people will always be looking for clothing, right? Now you do have to obviously pay attention to current trends and time of the year and stuff like that. But even with that, if you turn on global shipping with eBay, you're going to be selling Sorel boots in the summer in America because it's winter in Australia, right? And so clothing is one of those things that sells year round. Clothing will always be a need because people need something to wear, right? And my thoughts are, as we're moving into a downturn economy and a possible recession, I do think that clothing is going to do well, right? Because people are, even now, like I think about myself, and not that the things are really bad, but like I've canceled some of my subscriptions for like, different streaming services because I'm like, do I really need to spend money on that, right? And it's gonna go to clothing too. Like, do I really need to spend $60, $80, $100 something on dress shoes, or I can just go on eBay and drop $40? This last time my son needed to wear a suit and I needed to wear a suit. We're going to a conference, and I was like, let me just go to my inventory. And I had some sweet shoes in there that were like $100 something shoes that I paid $5 for. And I'm like, this is cheaper than me going to the store. Might as well use these. So clothing, okay, the good, the bad, and the best. Hopefully, if you're a new seller, this helps you out. If you're an experienced seller, hopefully it gives you some things to think about. As Mike said before, if there are things that you're like, hey, Orlando, Mike, you guys missed this, or you should have just talked about this, let us know in the comments. And appreciate all you tuning in. And as always, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Late.
Peace.